Welcome to Diecast Restos. I'm Jason, and today I have a custom commission job on my hands. This is my first time tackling a Chinese-made Welly diecast. I'm doing this as buyer Brad got in touch following my Auto Alex Phil MX-5 custom, asking if I could recreate his Citroën C2 Code Edition. There were few 1/64 scale Citroën C2s I was aware of. I knew Majorette made an Andros Trophy ice racing version with big arches and a rear wing, and I was also aware of a now scarce no-rev model too. Luckily, I had this Welly casting sat in my drawers ready for a custom. It had its problems, like a bent set of axles and a crack to the window piece, but these were minor issues I could overcome to replicate Brad's car. I just needed a matching shade of paint, a new set of matching wheels, and some custom-made decals. I had intended on recreating my brother's second car using this at some point, which happened to be a black C2. There's not much I can tell you about the casting itself. It's badged as a 2003 Citroën C2 on the underside, and only came in silver, blue or red as far as I can tell. Trim was applied to the headlights, side repeaters and Citroën badge on the front, with Citroën wording, badge and C2 tampos on the rear. The front lower grille was filled in black and the tail lights coloured block red. The base and body connect with a deep lying front rivet and an awkwardly placed tongue and slot fitment at the back. I'll probably end up colour coordinating that later on. The C2 was Citroën's replacement for their 7-year-old Saxo Supermini in 2003. Designed by Donato Coco, who would go on to pen Ferrari's 458 and California, the C2 launched alongside the C3 aimed at younger drivers. The C3 was a larger, family-friendly hatchback with a more rounded shape, while the C2 had only 2 doors and was generally flatter in style. One of the biggest issues faced by the older Saxo was its Euro NCAP crash test safety rating of only 2 stars out of 5. The new C2 was rated 4 stars. The C2 was available in a variety of specs, which allowed it to be offered across a wide market. The entry levels were the No Frills L and LX models, which had basic equipment, black plastic bumpers and no fog lamps. A design model had body-coloured bumpers and electric windows. The SX was the C2's luxury spec. This also had colour-coded bumpers as well as air conditioning. If this was equipped on the base 1.1 litre 4-cylinder engines, the car's 0 to 62 mph time increases by 4.5 seconds to 17.2 seconds. The old Saxo was made famous in Europe for its performance packages, namely the Furio, VTR and VTS versions. These gave it a reputation as a pocket rocket, and it was incredibly popular in the late 90s max power culture. I've picked up some Halford's Peugeot Iron Grey paint for this custom. It matches the paint code provided to me by Brad. In case you were wondering, Peugeot and Citroën have both formed part of the PSA group since 1976, despite both being rival French manufacturers. I'm now gluing the broken piece of the transparency back in place, as that came off a little earlier on. Brad's wheels on his C2 are Speedline Corse, and very handily, the brilliant Creative 164 had this matching set available. The only difference is that Brad's are 4 lug on the C2, while the printed set are 5 lug. But we can gloss over that minor matter, can't we? The Furio, VTR and VTS model ranges carried over to the C2 following their success on the Saxo. The Furio wore the same sports body as the VTR and VTS, but lacked the alloy wheels. The VTR was equipped with a 102 brake horsepower engine, while the VTS had a power output of 116, making it capable of 0 to 62 in 8 seconds. Compared to contemporary hot hatches, this was fairly slow, though it was designed to be more insurance friendly. After I met with Brad at a local car show, he told me he had removed the rear seats of his car, so of course I had to lose them. A limited edition GT C2 was made available in the UK in 2004. These had a sports body kit, white alloy wheels, and were painted red, silver, blue or black in a limited number of 2,500. The C2 had some revisions in 2006, including half colour coded door mirrors, clear side repeaters, and white rear indicator lenses. The VTR had minor changes to its alloy wheels. Internally, it had a new stereo with computer integration and some cosmetic changes. In 2007, the C2 had a facelift with a new larger front bumper and restyled grille. Throughout production, the C2 had an optional stop and start system that was offered as a separate trim level. This utilised a small electric motor that disengaged the engine when the vehicle was brought to a complete stop when pushing the brake pedal. It could also be equipped with sensor drive, an automated 5-speed manual transmission which removed the gear stick and clutch pedal, replaced with paddle shifts behind the steering wheel. In 2007, Citroën offered the Code Special Edition, which is what Brad's car is. This has a rough textured roof barcode-like graphic, black or pearlescent iron grey paint, and tan-coloured heated seats. These are powered by the 125 horsepower 1.6 litre 16-valve engines. Similarly, Citroën offered a Loeb edition, so named after multiple World Rally champion Sebastian Loeb, which equally had unique interior and exterior features. The C2 was built up until 2009. It had no direct successor, with alternative offerings from Citroën, the smaller C1 city car, or the larger second generation C3. From 2006 to 2013, the C2 name was used in China on a rebadged Peugeot 206. This simply had a modified front and rear end, and had no common features with the European C2. So you'll have seen there has been a fair amount of detailing going on to Brad's C2 recreation. I'm trying to recreate the bare metal of the floor following the removal of those rear seats. I'll move on to painting the front seats shortly. After the final touches are added to the exterior, I can begin washing the light clusters in Citadel Gloss Nuln Oil to add depth to them. I do like it when manufacturers add in moulded details to the underside of the models. To enhance these, I draw on chrome paint from my Molotow paint pens. I'm a bit hasty in clear coating as I've yet to add the rooftop barcode decals, but an extra coat won't hurt. To recreate the rich tan colour of the Code Edition seats, I first paint on a brown undercoat over the primer. Following that is Tamiya's TS73 Clear Orange, which will make it look closer to the real seating. Brad then told me he had a custom steering wheel fitted, so I set to work on removing the original from the separate dash moulding and drilling a hole for the new one. Straight through my finger, hence the plaster here. Would that stop bleeding? Absolutely not. It was pouring out for ages. But less woe is me, the show must go on. Once that new wheel has set in place, I coat it in primer. For the C2's registration plates, I first mount the custom decals I created onto some thin white styrene sheets, rolling out the excess moisture. Then I turn to the body and applying the barcode decal. To replicate the rough finish, I printed this on clear decal paper and turned up the DPI in order to give it a really blotchy look. It's also not a black decal, rather a dark grey. Both registrations and barcode decals are coated with Mr. Mark's softer solution. This helps to set the decals before clear lacquer is applied. I have to say I'm really pleased with how the rooftop decal came out. Next, I coat the dash piece in Tamiya TS29 semi-gloss black. And then it is time to fit the registration plates, which I've since cut from these styrene sheets. These are glued in place using Gorilla Super Glue Gel. It's a bit of a precarious process, trying to not get that glue anywhere but on the plate. One final thing for the interior is chrome for the top of the gear knob. Now I can clear coat it once again. The colours do look a bit off between the image and the footage, but that's mostly just down to lighting. For a few added niceties, I'm adding in the chrome vent surrounds, red digital display with chrome top, and the hazard warning lights button to that dash piece. So let's put Brad's C2 together. One word of note, I couldn't get the ride height any lower as the plastic suspension piece wasn't particularly happy with my wider than stock axle, but I think the final result still looks great. It was also difficult to get that base plate fitted properly owing to that deep rivet post, but once there it secures with a 3mm M2 screw. So this is how the Welly Citroën C2 looked when we kicked off. It had a bent set of axles, particularly at the front, a scraped and scuffed transparency, again particularly at the front, slightly chipped paintwork, and at the back the rear window had a big crack in it. I've been able to conceal this with some extended black paint without obscuring the whole rear window, thankfully. So let's see the C2's transformation. Here's Brad's C2 recreation in all its glory. I've matched the paint to the real paint code the car had, added in its registration plates, fully loaded the trim detailing, affixed the special edition code decal on the roof, painted the seating in the tan leather of the Code Edition, colour coded the rear slot fitment for the base, concealed the crack to the rear window, and given it a perfect matching set of Speedline Corse wheels. Sadly, I couldn't get the ride height any lower without compromising the wheel's rollability. But I think it still looks great, and I hope Brad thinks so too. If you fancy a custom of your car, get in touch and we could talk ideas. Send me a DM at Diecast Restos on Instagram or email me. My email address is in the video description. Please leave a like, a comment and subscribe, but all that leaves me to say is thanks for watching and I'll see you again for the next one. Bye for now.